I want to talk to you today about something that's been weighing heavily on my heart because I see so many people over the age of 60 doing what they truly believe is right for their health, only to discover that certain habits they've adopted are actually working against them. And one of those habits involves seeds. Now, I know that sounds surprising because we've all been told that seeds are nature's gift, packed with fiber and healthy oils and minerals. But I need you to understand something very important. After the age of 60, your body changes in profound ways, and what served you well in your younger years may no longer serve you the same way. Your blood vessels are not as elastic as they once were. Your circulation is not as vigorous. And your brain, that magnificent organ that governs everything you think and feel and remember, becomes more vulnerable to disruptions in blood flow. Let me explain what I mean by that. Your brain requires a constant, steady supply of oxygen-rich blood. Every single moment of every single day, your brain is demanding that your heart pump fresh, fluid blood through vessels that must remain open and flexible. When you were younger, your body had a remarkable capacity to handle imbalances. If you ate something that caused a bit of inflammation or a slight thickening of the blood, your resilient vessels could adjust, but after 60, that resilience begins to fade. Your margin for error becomes much smaller, and this is where seeds come into the picture, because many of the seeds we've been taught to embrace as health foods can actually create problems that your aging vascular system struggles to manage. Now, I often see people sprinkling seeds on everything, their yogurt, their salads, their smoothies, thinking they're building a fortress of health. And I want you to know that I'm not here to make you afraid of food. I'm here to help you understand how your body truly works so that you can make choices that support your brain and your circulation rather than unknowingly undermining them. Let me start by talking about sunflower seeds. These are everywhere, aren't they? You see them in trail mixes. You buy them in big bags at the store. You think of them as a harmless snack. But here's what you need to know. Sunflower seeds are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Now, your body does need some omega-6, but the problem is that most people are already getting far too much of it from vegetable oils and processed foods. And when you add concentrated sources like sunflower seeds on top of that, you create a state of chronic inflammation in your blood vessels. Let me explain why this matters for your brain. Inflammation causes your arteries to become stiff and narrow. Your blood vessels produce a substance called nitric oxide, which is like a signal that tells your arteries to relax and stay open. But when inflammation takes over, the production of nitric oxide decreases. Your vessels lose their ability to respond and dilate when your brain needs more blood. And after 60, your brain is already operating on a thinner margin of blood flow reserve. So if your vessels are chronically inflamed and unable to open properly, your brain is constantly struggling to get the oxygen it needs. You might not feel it happening, but over time this sets the stage for strokes and cognitive decline. I remember working with a gentleman who had replaced his afternoon snacks with sunflower seeds because he thought it was the healthy choice. And within a few months he started experiencing episodes of confusion and dizziness. His blood pressure became very difficult to control. When we looked closely at his diet, we realized that his healthy snack was keeping his blood vessels in a permanent state of constriction. His brain was literally gasping for oxygen because his arteries had lost their flexibility. And once we removed those seeds and focused on foods that supported vascular health, his symptoms improved dramatically. Now let's talk about sesame seeds. These are often seen as a staple of healthy eating, especially in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern diets. You find them on bagels, in tahini, in hummus, and yes, they do contain minerals, but here's the problem. Sesame seeds are very high in something called phytic acid. Phytic acid is what we call an anti-nutrient because it binds to essential minerals in your digestive tract and prevents your body from absorbing them. And one of the most important minerals it binds to is magnesium. Magnesium is absolutely critical for your brain's blood vessels. It's the mineral that tells your arteries when to relax. When your magnesium levels are low or unstable, your blood pressure becomes erratic. It fluctuates up and down in ways that put tremendous stress on the delicate vessels in your brain. And after 60, your brain cannot tolerate those fluctuations the way it used to. Every time your blood pressure swings wildly, you're creating tiny injuries in the walls of your blood vessels. Over time, this leads to what we call small vessel disease, where the smallest arteries in your brain start to leak and fail. I worked with a woman who loved her Mediterranean diet and ate tahini and sesame crackers every single day. She thought she was doing everything right. But when we looked at her brain scans, we saw dozens of tiny spots, markers of chronic unstable blood flow. Her body wasn't getting the magnesium it needed because the phytic acid in the sesame seeds was binding it up before it could be absorbed. Once we reduced her intake of those high phytate seeds and focused on bioavailable sources of minerals, her dizzy spells stopped and her vascular health stabilized. Now I want to talk to you about chia seeds because this is one that surprises people the most. Chia seeds have been marketed as a miracle food, haven't they? They're supposed to help with digestion, with weight loss, with heart health, and people are adding them to their oatmeal and their smoothies every single morning. But here's what you must understand. Chia seeds are incredibly absorbent. A single chia seed can absorb up to 12 times its weight in water. And when you eat them dry or without soaking them properly, they don't just sit in your stomach. They start pulling water out of your bloodstream and your surrounding tissues. For someone over 60 whose thirst signals are already naturally diminished, this creates a dangerous state of dehydration. As your blood loses fluid to the chia seeds in your gut, the liquid portion of your blood decreases, and what's left behind is a higher concentration of red blood cells and platelets. Your blood becomes thick, almost like syrup, and thick blood doesn't flow easily through the tiny capillaries that feed your brain. We call this sludge blood in medicine, and it's one of the most dangerous conditions for someone at risk of stroke. You see, you don't need a clot to have a stroke. Sometimes the blood is simply too thick to reach the deepest parts of your brain. And this is especially dangerous in the morning, when your blood pressure naturally surges to wake you up. If you've eaten dry chia seeds the night before, or first thing in the morning without drinking enough water, your blood is at its thickest at the exact moment your pressure is highest. You're forcing thick, sluggish blood through delicate vessels under intense pressure, and that's when strokes happen. I remember a man who was so proud of his daily chia habit. He would sprinkle the seeds on his yogurt every morning to stay regular. And one morning, while he was out in his garden, he suffered what we call a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke. He was confused because his cholesterol was perfect, his diet was clean, but when we looked deeper, we found that he was chronically dehydrated. His chia seeds were acting like a sponge inside his body, pulling critical fluid away from his circulation. His blood had become so thick that it simply couldn't reach the small vessels in his brain. Once he stopped eating dry seeds and focused on proper hydration, his episodes stopped completely. Let me talk now about poppy seeds, because most people don't think twice about them. They're just a garnish on a bagel or a muffin, right? But poppy seeds contain trace amounts of natural alkaloids, the same compounds found in opium. Now, these amounts are far too small to cause any kind of high, but they are biologically active enough to interfere with your autonomic nervous system. That's the system that controls your involuntary functions, including the constant adjustment of your blood vessel diameter. In your younger years, your nervous system could easily filter out these tiny amounts. But after 60, your ability to regulate your own blood pressure becomes much more fragile. When these alkaloids enter your system, they can cause subtle disruptions in how your vessels respond to movement or stress. You might experience sudden drops in blood pressure when you stand up, followed by sharp spikes as your body tries to compensate. And for an older brain with brittle arteries, these swings are devastating. Each fluctuation places immense mechanical stress on your vessel walls, increasing your risk of a hemorrhagic stroke, where a vessel actually ruptures. I consulted with a gentleman who ate a poppy seed bagel every single morning, and he started having episodes where he felt disconnected and unsteady for about 30 minutes after breakfast. When we monitored his blood pressure continuously, we saw a pattern of wild instability. His brain wasn't receiving a smooth, rhythmic flow of blood. It was being subjected to unpredictable pressure waves. Once he removed those poppy seeds from his routine, his blood pressure stabilized and his symptoms vanished. Now, I need to tell you about something called cottonseed, because this is what I call the ghost seed. Most people don't buy cottonseed intentionally, but it's hidden in seed mixes, health bars, and many vegetable oils. Because cotton is grown as a fiber crop, not a food crop, it's often subjected to different agricultural standards. And cottonseed contains a natural toxin called gossypol. This is the cotton plant's defense against insects. While industrial processing removes much of it, trace amounts often remain. And for your brain, gossypol is a direct poison to the cells that line your blood vessels. Gossypol penetrates the mitochondria, the energy-producing parts of your cells. When the mitochondria in your vessel walls are damaged, those vessels lose the energy they need to stay flexible and responsive. They become stiff and tired, unable to meet the demands of your brain's blood flow, and this leads to what we call lacuna strokes, small deep blockages that occur when the tiny exhausted arteries in the center of your brain finally collapse. I worked with a woman who loved natural vegetable oil blends and packaged seed snacks that used cottonseed as a cheap filler. She didn't have high blood pressure, but her cognitive tests showed a rapid decline. When we looked at her brain scans, we saw a pattern of microvascular fragility. Her smallest vessels were failing because they lacked the energy to maintain their structure. She wasn't being poisoned by something obvious. She was being slowly undermined by a hidden industrial byproduct that was dismantling her brain's power supply. Once we cleaned up her diet and removed those hidden oils, her mental clarity began to return. Let me talk about flax seeds now, because this is one of the most controversial. Flax seeds are considered the gold standard of healthy seeds, aren't they? Everyone says they're full of omega-3s and fiber and lignans. But here's what you need to understand. When you eat whole flax seeds, your body cannot break them down. The outer shell of a flax seed is incredibly tough, and your digestive system, especially as you age, simply cannot crack it open. So those whole seeds pass through you without releasing their nutrients. But they don't just pass through harmlessly. They act like an osmotic sponge in your intestines, pulling fluid into your gut and away from your bloodstream. For someone whose digestive system is already slower, this creates dehydration and blood pressure instability, and flax seeds are also very high in phytic acid, just like sesame seeds, so they bind to minerals like magnesium and calcium and prevent your body from absorbing them. You're not just missing out on the benefits of flax, you're actively stripping your vascular system of the minerals it needs to function properly. I remember a woman who ate 2 tablespoons of whole flax seeds every single morning. She was suffering from terrible episodes where her blood pressure would drop suddenly when she stood up, and then spike violently as her body tried to compensate. When we investigated, we found that her healthy habit was causing chronic dehydration and mineral depletion. Her brain's ability to regulate its own blood flow was collapsing. Once she switched to small amounts of freshly ground flax seeds, which are much easier for the body to absorb, her blood pressure stabilized completely. And now I want to talk about what I consider the most dangerous of all, and that's superseed mixes. You see them everywhere now. They're marketed as a convenient way to get multiple seeds in one handful. Gourmet granolas, protein bars, trail mixes. People buy them thinking they're getting a nutritional powerhouse. But for a brain over 60, these mixes are not a shortcut to health. They're a perfect storm of vascular stress. When you combine 3, 4, or 5 different seeds in one serving, you're not just getting more nutrients. You're stacking every single biological stressor we've talked about today into one concentrated dose. You're getting the inflammatory omega-6 overload from sunflower seeds, the mineral-binding phytates from sesame and flax, the dehydration risk from chia, and possibly the mitochondrial toxins from hidden cottonseed oil, all at once. And your aging body simply cannot manage that level of metabolic chaos. This leads to what I call cerebral hypoperfusion without a blockage. Most people think you need a clot to have a stroke, but I see many cases where the brain simply doesn't get enough blood because the entire vascular system is overwhelmed. Your blood becomes thick, your vessels become inflamed and rigid, your minerals are depleted, and your blood pressure fluctuates wildly. The result is that your neurons begin to starve, not because a pipe is blocked, but because the entire system is failing at once. I treated a gentleman who replaced his traditional breakfast with a superseed granola to lower his cholesterol. He thought he was doing everything right, but he suffered a stroke that affected his balance and coordination. When we examined him, his arteries weren't clogged. They were exhausted. His healthy breakfast was creating daily vascular turmoil that his brain could no longer buffer. He didn't need a superseed combo. He needed simplicity and stability. So what do I want you to do with this information? I want you to go into your kitchen tonight and perform what I call a seed audit. Look at your pantry, look at your seeds and your health bars and your granolas, and I want you to evaluate them not as calories or fiber, but as signals to your vascular system. If your flax seeds are whole, they need to be ground, or they're doing more harm than good. If you see cottonseed oil or vegetable oil blends, those need to go. If you're eating super seed mixes with 5 different types of seeds, you're creating a storm that your brain cannot handle. I want you to simplify. Choose 1 or 2 high-quality seeds. If you love flax, grind it fresh and use small amounts. If you want omega-3s, consider walnuts, which are gentler on your system. If you must use chia, soak it thoroughly for hours before consuming it, and drink plenty of water throughout the day. But most importantly, I want you to understand that more is not better when it comes to seeds after 60. Your brain doesn't want a bombardment of superfoods. It wants stability. It wants clean, fluid blood flowing effortlessly through flexible vessels. You've worked too hard to build your life, your wisdom, your independence. Don't let a handful of seeds, no matter how healthy they're marketed to be, undermine the very vessels that keep your mind sharp and your body mobile. Your brain is the seat of who you are. It holds your memories, your personality, your connection to the people you love. Protect it with the same care you would protect anything precious. And I want you to know that this isn't about fear. This is about empowerment. You now have knowledge that most people don't have. You understand the direct connection between what you eat and how your brain's blood vessels respond. You are the guardian of your own cerebral blood flow, and that is a powerful position to be in. Now, before I close, I want to be very clear with you about something important. The information I've shared with you today is based on principles of natural health and an understanding of how the body works, particularly as we age. I've drawn from knowledge about circulation, inflammation, hydration, and the way our vascular system responds to different foods. But I want you to understand that it's not possible for me to cover every aspect of this topic in a single conversation. There is always more to learn, and I encourage you to seek out additional information from trusted health resources and to speak with your own healthcare providers about your individual situation. If you want to learn more about vascular health, brain function, and how diet affects circulation, I encourage you to visit reputable health education websites such as the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, the American Heart Association, and trusted medical research databases like PubMed, where you can read studies on topics like omega-6 fatty acids, phytic acid, and cerebral blood flow. These sources provide detailed scientific information that can help you understand the mechanisms I've described today in even greater depth. I also want to remind you that everyone's body is different, and what affects one person may not affect another in the same way. This information is meant to educate and empower you, but it should never replace personalized medical advice from a qualified healthcare professional who knows your complete health history. My hope is that this has given you a new way of looking at the foods you choose, and that you'll approach your health with greater awareness and intention, because you deserve to live your golden years with clarity, strength, and independence. And that begins with understanding how to truly nourish the body you've been given. Thank you for listening, and may you walk forward with wisdom and peace.